Hello, everybody. Today on What's That About? We have a special interview episode. We're excited to have Mark McGovern, a council member for 10 years, the current vice mayor of Cambridge and former mayor. And thanks for coming on our show, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter.
All right. Uh, c- we'll just start with some, background. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do outside of being a council member before and now?
Sure. So I come from right here in Cambridge. I'm actually sitting in the dining room of the house that my great grandparents purchased in 1918, and
Hmm.
I grew up here and raising my kids here, so right in Central Square. So I'm born and raised in Cambridge. Uh, in addition to doing the political thing, which I've been doing for about 20 years now. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and I've worked for 30 years as a social worker, primarily with children and families. About half that time has been in therapeutic schools, like out of district school placements for kids who are struggling with, various behavior issues, mental health issues, learning disabilities, and probably the other half of that time working in with kids who are in the foster care system, families that have been experiencing poverty, homelessness, abuse, and neglect. Right now, I do some consulting on the side for juvenile courts. Anytime a child comes into the custody of the state, the juvenile court has to do a family assessment. And so I'm one of the people that they contract with to do those assessments for kids who come into the custody of the state because of alleged abuse or neglect. So I do that on the side.
Okay. And I'm sorry, did you say do you kind of work for yourself now, or do you work for an organization?
Yeah,
Number.
it's sort of on my own. It's a like a consultant. I'm not an official state employee. I get it's a contracted, 1099
Yeah.
position. Um, and anyone, lawyers can do it, so licensed social workers can do it.
Hmm. Great. So how did you get into politics in general? What got you interested in politics, and what eventually drove you to run for city council?
Yeah. So in some ways, it's kind of was always in my mind. My mother worked for Mayor Duhay. She helped start the mayor's summer work program. She was the first commissioner for the Women's Commission before it was an official position. She was one of the women that helped start that commission. It was the first of its kind in the country. So I sort of grew up around Cambridge politics, and you know, my mother worked on Alice Vol's campaign. Was, from the time I was very young, Sandra Graham. So I kind of grew up in that world a little bit. So it was always kind of part of who I was, learning that you sort of work to leave your community better off than how it was left to you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but when I finally decided to actually, jump in was after when my first son was born and was getting ready to enter the Cambridge Public Schools. I had been working, like I said, I was working in therapeutic schools and had a lot of experience in special education and working with kids. And it was right at the time when the school district had gone through this major restructuring. And it was a really messy process. This is going back 20 years. Um, and it was really, um, however people felt about the decisions that were made, the process itself was really uh, messy. A lot of schools fighting against each other. I don't want to be with those kids. I don't want my kids with those kids. It was really a mess. And I didn't think the school committee or the district really handled it very well.
Hmm.
So I said, now's the time, right? I got a kid entering the schools. I've got all this experience as a social worker and mediating and, working with all different groups of people. Things look like they're kind of a mess right now. Let's make a run. And I did, and here I am.
Yeah. Those are good reasons. I understand being motivated. Um, and so did you run for school committee first? Were you on the school committee first? And then
I was. So I ran, I won my first election for school committee in November 2003.
Mhm.
And then I lost my reelection.
Mm.
And then I came back and did three more terms on the school committee before running for council and getting elected in 2013 to the council.
Did you feel that your time on the school committee set you up for city council at all, or was it was it a rough kind of changeover? What did you learn in school committee that you felt carried over?
Yeah, I mean, it was helpful in some ways, but obviously some of the city council, you're dealing with a whole lot more, right? A
Hmm.
lot of different issues, and actually, that was part of the reason why I decided to run for council. I increasingly began to better understand. I think I always knew this on some level, but I think I sort of started to better understand that we can have the best curriculum in our schools, we can have wonderful teachers, we can have great buildings, but if you're not helping people with housing, if you're not helping people keep the lights on in their apartment, if you're not, helping people put food on the table, all those other things, certainly matter, but your kids aren't going to reach their full potential if they're going home to no food, if they're going home to a single parent who has to work 4 jobs in order to keep living here. And those were things that were sort of more on the city council side. So
Hmm.
I did some seats opened up. Marjorie Decker left. I forget who else. Henrietta, no, not Henrietta. A couple other people had not run, so there were a couple seats open. I thought, this is an opportunity, to kind of expand the issues that I'm working on to help more people and to help people in a lot of different ways than I could just on the school committee. So
Hmm.
that's sort of when I made that jump. But it certainly helped to, you learn how the politics works, right? Up close, right? You learn how do you negotiate with your colleagues? How do you um how just the rules of Robert's Rules of Order, right? And
Yeah.
how how things actually just happen that you folks in the public don't necessarily see up close because they're not in the room all the time. So so in that case it was helpful to really give me that foundation, but the issues were kind of different.
Yeah. And you were the mayor of Cambridge is seats on the head of the school committee, right? Did you
Correct.
fe when you took your turn as mayor a couple years ago, how did it feel? Do you feel like you were uniquely qualified? I mean, I guess you're not, the first mayor who was on the school committee, but um, do you think you were uniquely qualified for that position?
Yeah, I think, one of the most important responsibilities from the mayor is chairing the school committee.
Hmm.
And so having served there, and I was mayor, I guess it was my third term into city council. So it wasn't like I was gone for all that long. It wasn't like it was 20 years ago that I last served on the school committee, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of the issues that we were dealing with when I was mayor were the same issues that we were dealing with when I was on school committee.
Hmm.
And quite honestly, a lot of the issues we were dealing with when I was on school committee were the same issues that we were dealing with when I was a student in the Cambridge Public Schools. I mean, these issues of a two-tiered educational system where some kids get a world-class education and some kids, uh, fall through the cracks and don't. That's something we've been struggling with, for far too long. So, the issues were pretty similar, but I felt, yeah, certainly, having that time on the school committee and my professional experience, it was something that gave me, I think, an advantage, I guess, or sort of a leg up in that role.
Hmm. Do you as is it hard to like do any Monday morning quarterbacking on like what's going on in the school committee now? Do you like do you catch yourself from like saying too much, or I'm not sure
Y-
how that is.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was on school committee, the things that are often frustrating to school committee members is because the schools are so important, right? And you're talking about people's kids and they're always a hot topic, right? Politically.
Hmm. Sure.
You know, there's oftentimes city councilors who really don't know what's going on in the schools. Either they don't have kids, and I mean, also this other. I also was a parent of kids in the schools, right?
Hmm.
So I went through the schools. I've had 4 kids in the schools. 2 have graduated. 2 are starting. My twins are starting high school in a few weeks.
Hmm.
I have my work experience, and then so I kind of came at it from a lot of different perspectives. Um, But there's a lot of city councilors over the years who they don't know what's really going on in the schools, right? So, but they know it's a hot topic, and so they feel like they have to jump in, right? And so they jump in and they don't really know what's going on.
Mhm.
And there's definitely a little bit of, hey, stick in your, we're not commenting, school committee's not commenting on bike lanes and zoning. You don't comment on, curriculum and whatever. So there's a little bit of that, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, we have to be, we're a small enough city where we have to be able to work collaboratively because, as I said, the decisions that we make on city council about housing, about preschool, about after school, about, when I was mayor, before the state, I implemented free breakfast and lunch in the schools.
Mm.
Those are city council decisions that clearly have an impact on kids in our school district. So it's this delicate dance, right? You don't want to overstep. School committee is an elected body. They're elected to do what they do.
Right.
If I wanted to run the schools, I'd run for school committee again, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, there is obviously a connection and an overlap that you have to be able to kind of manage in a respectful way that respects people's positions and um but you have to be able to work together too. So it's delicate for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you I don't want to get too personal here, but are you going to, are your kids in the public school system, or are you going to send them to
Yeah.
Ridge in Latin? Hmm.
Oh, absolutely. They just graduated from the Cambridge Street Upper School. They went to King
Mm.
Open. They started at Kennedy Longfellow, and they'll be going to the high school, and we're excited about it. They're
Yeah.
they're excited and scared at the same time, I think, but that's normal.
Yeah. I tutor there during the school year at Ridge in Latin. It's pretty impressive. I find it impressive. I mean, I only see certain parts of it, but yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
it's
a great.
really like I said, I mean, people think that we have this, that Cambridge has this agreement with Harvard that they have to take a certain number of Cambridge kids. They don't. There is no such agreement. And
Mhm.
we send, 10, 12, 14 kids to Harvard every year from the high school. Those kids earned it. Like they don't, it's not a free ride. It's not like these are kids that, have a 55 grade point average and Harvard has to take them because, they have to fill a quota. That's not the case. So, you have kids that go on and go on to Ivy League schools and do really, really well. The flip side is you have kids that, you know, aren't prepared to go to Bunker Hill, right? And that's the struggle, right? I mean, we should, with our resources, our size, every kid should be getting a world-class education, and we just have not cracked that nut for decades.
Yeah. I mean, I think if Cambridge does it, they'll be the first. Unfortunately, but yeah, yeah, I've
Yeah.
found that math, especially math skills in middle school and high school, is maybe not what I expected when I first started tutoring. You know, they kids come in without a lot of skills in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of, when I started on school committee, the superintendent at the time, uh, Tom Fowler Finn, Dr. Fowler Finn, um, he really started to bring in benchmarks for the district. And that was something that the district really didn't have before. So you could go to Graham and Parks and learn how to write a 5-page research paper by the 8th grade. And then you could go to another school and all you did was worksheets. And then you
Hmm.
would all come together at the high school and you would have these, kids that had incredibly different skill sets.
Yeah.
He started to say, look, I don't care how you teach it. I'm not going to tell you what book to assign, but every kid who finishes first grade should know these things. Every kid that finishes second grade should know. And the state was going in that direction, and that has helped a little bit because it's still an individual. Schools still have their individual personalities and the way they teach, and obviously teachers do things differently. But at least we're a little better at by the time every kid graduates 8th grade, there are still some basic things that every kid, regardless of what school they go to, should be
Yeah.
able to do. That wasn't the case when I was in school.
Hmm. Okay. That's interesting. I'm sorry. Do you have a hard out time? Because I don't want
No,
to
I'm
keep you.
good.
Okay. You've lived in Cambridge your whole life. Um, what makes it unique? What, everyone thinks the place they're from is special, right? But like, what do you value most about Cambridge? And do you think there's things that we can bring from like neighboring towns that would or help or cautionary tales, from like Somerville and
Mhm.
stuff like that?
Yeah, I think, obviously the thing that everyone talks about when they talk about Cambridge is the diversity that's here, right?
Hmm.
And I often say that it's our greatest strength, but it's also a big challenge, right? It's hard to be a diverse community, because there's a lot of different needs, a lot of different desires. People want a lot of different things, and you can't always do everything to make everybody happy, right? And so that's a challenge, but it's wonderful, right? And the fact that, getting back to the school piece, I remember on school committee, I was debating with a colleague, I won't mention who it is, but um, about we were talking about control choice and we were talking about diversity in our schools. And she said, well, there's no evidence to show that diversity helps test scores.
Mm.
And I said, well, I bet you there is. There probably is. There's research that shows all kinds of different things. I said, but that aside, I can't tell you that my going to high school with, I think there were something like 56 different nationalities at Ringe when I was there. I can't tell you if that helped or hurt my SAT scores. What I
Hmm.
can tell you is that that's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything in the world, and I learned far more by going to school with people from different religions and cultures and languages and races and all of that than I did, you know if I was in a school that was all middle class white kids. So
Hmm.
that is, I'm thrilled that my kids have that, right? My daughter, when Trump was first elected, my daughter came home from school in tears one day, and I think we were all in tears during that time. And I asked her what was wrong, and she said that one of her friends was afraid that one of her friends was going to have to leave the country because she was Muslim, and Trump was, the Muslim ban.
Hmm.
And for again a middle class white kid to feel that connected to a Muslim brown-skinned girl who happened to live in public housing
Hmm.
was just such a great example of what this city is, right? So that I think is wonderful. We're a small city, which again allows us to do a lot of things that maybe larger cities can't do. We are a well-resourced city financially. That allows us to do things that other communities can't do. But yet we're large enough that you don't know everybody, and you can always find new things and meet new people. And so it's a nice. I think we're a really nice combination of a lot of different things. Um, and we have high expectations for our government and for our services, and we should, because we again we have the resources to do a whole lot that other communities can't do. So we're in a unique position, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been on the council for 10 years now. Do you what are you most proud of what you've accomplished? And let's start with that. Like what
Sure.
are your benchmarks?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one thing, and there's a lot of things I'm proud of my record on. Um, but if I had to pick one thing, it's the affordable housing overlay and the leadership that I had in getting that passed and getting that written and I assume you know what it is, but if people
Hmm.
don't know what it is, it's the citywide zoning ordinance that says that if you build 100% affordable housing, and it has to be affordable in perpetuity, you can't change it to market rent 20 years from now, doesn't expire, that we will give you extra height, extra density, and streamline the permitting process, to make it easier to build affordable housing and to give the affordable housing folks an opportunity to get in the market. They were just getting outbid for every piece of property because they were competing with market rate developers who had a lot more money, right? So we had to
Right.
give them some sort of advantage. And it'll be 4 years in October when that passes, and we have over 700 units of 100% affordable housing in the pipeline, being built. And if you compare that to our inclusionary zoning, which was considered the most progressive thing at the time, that's produced 1,500 units in 30 years,
Yeah.
right? We've got 700 in the first, 3.5 almost 4 years.
Yeah.
So this is going to prove to be the most influential affordable housing policy that this city has ever passed. And I was on the lead on that. And so for me, that the fact that people are going to be moving into an affordable place to live 20 years from now when they have no idea who I am or how I voted or whatever,
Mhm.
all they're going to know is that the city has a program that's allowing them to stay in the city or to, to afford to stay here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 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 so glad, happy and proud that I played a part in that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of a national model. I've seen, national news organizations talking about it and things like that.
Yeah. And we
Um,
were the first to do. I mean, one of the knocks
yeah.
people said was, no one else is doing this. Why should Cambridge do it? Well,
Mhm.
because it's the right thing to do and we have the means to do it. And now it's, like you said, all over the country. I spoke to a group in Ireland that wants
Mhm.
to, model the AHO. So it's working, and it's being modeled in other places now. So that's pretty cool.
All right, well, let's stick with that for a second. Then, obviously, we didn't solve housing. I mean, the AHO is, I'm not. It's a great thing, but what else can we be doing? Cambridge. It feels like there's just not ever going to be enough housing. Is there anything we can do, that you think you can do from the city council position, or maybe even something we should do on the state level to encourage more people live here and keeping the culture of Cambridge alive instead of just turning into a kind of a place for tech tech
Yeah.
people to live who are millionaires.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, so first of all, you've got the housing market, right? The
Hmm.
millionaires who are buying a single family home for $2.5 million or whatever. Then you've got the rental market, and those things are, we often conflate them, but they're sort of different in some ways.
Yeah.
Um, and so we need a lot more housing. We do.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to be able to build our way out of this? I don't know, but I know that not building housing doesn't work.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, some people like to believe that supply and demand doesn't apply to Cambridge. It applies to Cambridge.
Sure.
Now, again, are we going to ever produce enough? I don't know. But right now, we know that we have a housing shortage. We know that the demand for housing out, outpaces the supply. And it's not just Cambridge, it's the metro area. So on the local level, the AHO is great for what it is, right? And
Hmm.
those are for people who qualify for subsidized housing. But there's a lot of people in Cambridge who are never going to qualify for subsidized housing who still can't afford to live here, right?
Right.
And are still getting priced out. They earn too much money for any of the programs we have, but not enough money to stay here, right?
Hmm.
And forget buying a home, right? So those people matter too, right? I want those people to be able to live here too. And so you have to we've with the AHO, we've kind of, and we're certainly not done with the affordable housing component, but we've made a big bold move there, and that's gotten better. Um, we also now are talking about how do we help that sort of middle income bracket, right? And so
Hmm.
we're talking now about allowing 6-story buildings as of right in
Hmm.
Cambridge. And what that would do is that would really produce a lot more housing. A lot of it would be market rent. Some of it would be inclusionary. So there is still an affordable component that comes with it, but a lot of it would indeed be market rent. But again, you need that, right? You need to add to the supply. Um, there was a study done by community development a few years back where they looked at when Cambridge stopped building housing, and it was sort of the last recession back when Obama took, that Obama inherited, right? So we're going back a
Right.
while, and housing production stopped. You saw rents increase.
Hmm.
When housing production kicked back up again and we started to add hundreds and 1,000, 2,000 units, you saw those rents stabilize and start to come down. Building housing works. Now, are we ever going to go back to the days where you could get a one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge for $450? No, like it's never going to be 1975 again, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing that. But could we take the rents that are now 3,500 for a one bedroom and maybe drop those to 2,800, 2,500?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could probably do that with more housing. So there's some also sort of what are the expectations that people have. We are this is a hotly desirable place to live, right? And so, you can't even get a one-bedroom apartment in Maine for under $1,000, right? So it's not going to happen here,
Right.
but we can bring it down, right? And
Mhm.
we can make it more manageable, and we should.
Yeah. The you mentioned 6 stories by right. Is there, what are the political prospects of that? Is there a will for that? I mean, I, I'm not the norm, I don't think, but I would definitely support something like that. But
Yeah.
do you think we need to
Well,
convince more people?
you'd be surprised because you're probably more of the norm than you think you are. I mean, the fact is that if you look at the last several elections,
Hmm.
the pro-housing
Yeah.
slate has won, and we've
Mhm.
maintained a majority, right? We're not necessarily the loudest, right? Not necessarily the folks who write the biggest checks to candidates or who have more of the political power, but we win elections, right? And that says something. So I
Mhm.
think there is a very strong pro-housing, pro-development contingent out there. Um, I think it has I think something will pass. I think there'll be there's some concern from folks about, if you do 6 stories as of right, kind of everywhere, are you going to get a 6-story building on some, dead end street that a 6-story building wouldn't quite
Right.
fit, right? But there are things that we can do about that. There's minimum lot sizes, right? That you're not
Far
going to get a
and
6-story building on a small lot, right?
right.
Because we're not going to get one of those needle buildings like they have in New York.
Yeah.
Um, and so you have to have a lot size that can fit a 6-story building. You can, there are setback requirements, open space requirements. So there are certainly things that we can put in place that would, make it as of right, but also put some parameters around it that I think would help people feel more comfortable. But at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't remember that game Sim City,
Sure.
right? Where you
Yep.
got to plan your own like we're not playing, that's not the game we're playing. That's not the
Right.
cards that I'm dealt, right?
Right.
I'm dealt the cards of a city that is geographically small,
Hmm.
that when you take out what Harvard owns, what MIT owns, you take out municipal buildings, you take out Dannehy Park, you take out Fresh Pond, you take out Cambridge Common, you're not left with a heck of a lot, right, of
Hmm.
space to build. We
Right.
have to build taller.
Right.
Someone told me that they would support. So, one of the issues came up about you asked about sort of how much housing. I don't know what the right number is, right?
Hmm.
And everyone's going to have a different number. But when we did Envision Cambridge, which was our citywide visioning process, the housing group from that came up with a number of 12,500 units of housing that we need to build by 2030. Now, this was 2020, COVID, right before COVID. Um, Obviously, that we're never reaching that goal because of COVID, because of interest rates, for a lot of things. But even if COVID didn't happen, and even if interest rates were still low, we wouldn't have reached that goal because our zoning doesn't allow us to build that much housing,
Right.
right? So, someone said to me, well, why can't we build triple deckers and reach that number?
Mm.
Okay, so three goes into 12,000, 4,000 times, right?
Yeah.
Where do we have 4,000 lots to build triple deckers? Beyond the fact that that's not even financially viable to do,
Right.
but we don't have 4,000 lots to build 4,000 triple deckers to get to 12,000 units.
Right.
We just don't have it. So as a social worker, I deal with reality. I deal with solving problems. It's not a fantasy. This isn't a game.
Hmm.
It's not, we can go out and have a beer and talk about what we wish the situation was, and happy to do that. That would be fun.
Hmm.
But that's not the reality. The
Right.
reality is if we're going to reach that 12,000 number, you have to build taller buildings. That's it.
Is that 12,000 number online? I mean, I'm aware of Envision Cambridge and I've read some of the details, but is that on
Yeah.
the CDD
Yeah,
site?
if you go to the Envision Cambridge report,
Mhm.
it's in the CDD on the CDD page of the city website,
Okay.
and then there's several different categories, housing being one of them, and they have a whole number of recommendations. One of them being 12,500 units by 2030.
Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Just real briefly, we can't even. I think Somerville passed that, the law that by right they can build triple deckers everywhere, right? I don't think Cambridge, most of the 95% of the buildings in Cambridge would not qualify under the current zoning rules. Is that right? The buildings.
I don't
I
think
mean, I
it's
know.
quite that high, but it's like 80%. I mean, it's up there.
Yeah.
Most of the housing, there are areas of the city where if you knocked down a triple decker, you couldn't rebuild that triple decker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some areas of the city where you would have to build a single family home.
Hmm.
So that's crazy, right? Multifamily housing should be allowed in every neighborhood across the city, without question. Now, that's an easy thing. I think everybody on the council agrees with that.
Hmm.
Where it becomes more complicated and where you start to see some division between councilors is it's one thing to say multifamily housing should be allowed everywhere. It's another thing to say if you actually want to see that multifamily housing built, you have to do other things. You have to change um, the density requirements. You have to change the setback requirements. You have to do other things that
Right.
would allow that housing to be built. Otherwise, you're just being performative about it, right?
Right.
And so that's where you start to see some distinctions, right? So some of us are like, yeah, okay, well, maybe you don't have to have everybody doesn't have to have a front yard, right? Or maybe you change some of the open space requirements, or you allow a 6-story building instead of a 3-story building because a 6-story building is more economically viable,
Right.
right? Some of us are more comfortable with that, and some are less so. Um, but I think everybody agrees that multifamily housing should be allowed everywhere. I don't think that's terribly controversial.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been to Cafe Burismo, the coffee place on Broadway. There's I guess a new meditation center or some kind of spiritual built, but the building, the one I look at, it was obviously built to satisfy all the setback requirements, and it's just so awkward in the space. It has like a little lawn on all four sides, and it's like it just looks so out of place in the rest of the building. And obviously they had to meet the existing zoning at the time, and they couldn't build
Yeah.
like a building that would just look in place, would fill up the lot size.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. No, it's funny. I just came back from vacation and with my family, and we went to do actually my great grandfather who bought this house is
mm,
from a little village outside of Naples, Italy, and we
mm,
went. Part of our trip was to go and visit his village of 2,000 people and see where he grew up and the family farm and all that stuff. And it
yeah,
was spectacular. But when you go to, when you look at Naples or Rome, um, none of that housing, there are no setbacks. Like
yeah,
everything is built up to this, right?
right,
And people are like, "Oh, we should be like Rome. We should be like Paris."
yeah,
There are no setbacks in those buildings. And so there's lots of different ways to do things. Um, but again, we have to deal with it's interesting. I think people, sort of your question earlier about what I think makes Cambridge special. I think people have a lot of different ideas about what that is, right?
hmm,
There are some people who view Cambridge as a quaint little town, right? We're Martha's Vineyard, we're little neighborhoods
hmm,
and we're quaint little shops, and
yeah,
and then some we are on some level.
hmm,
Some people view us as the fourth largest city in the state, an international community, the
hmm,
economic driver of the region, right? And we're that too. And so depending on what neighborhood you live in, depending on what you like, there's these differences of what we should be, right? And where we should be going. And, you know, I see us as a thriving, international diverse community, and I want to maintain that. And to maintain that, you got to bring housing prices down and rental prices down. Otherwise, we're going to be a place where only people who can afford $4,000 a month for rent can live. And
yeah,
that's fine. I mean, those people are cool too, but we're not gonna end up, we're gonna lose the diversity that we all say we love so much if we really don't tackle this in a bold way.
yeah,
And that means the city's gonna look different and is gonna change, but that's okay. The city that I grew up in doesn't look like the city my grandmother grew up in or my great grandfather grew up in. Thriving cities change over time. They're supposed to. That's good. That's healthy. Um, and we're kind of going through that right now.
hmm. Yeah. So I had planned to ask a bunch of questions about the treatment facilities we have in Cambridge. How much, I know you said you don't have a hard out, but how much, do you have like 20 more minutes, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Um, a- and I think your area is a little different from some of these questions I'm asking, but you tell me. Cambridge, I think famously has like four different shelters in Central Square, and treatment facilities, methadone clinic. Um, can you uh, do you think can you describe a little bit about what we offer in Central Square, and should we be doing more? Is there more that we as a town can do
Yeah.
to support
So this is
people?
actually this is actually right up my alley. Not only as a resident of Central Square, but also working on
Yeah,
issues of
me
mental
too.
health, substance use disorder, homelessness has been a big part of my work. So just a quick correction. We don't have a methadone clinic in Central Square. We have a
Okay.
needle exchange program, but they don't actually give out any medication. You
Okay.
can go and get clean needles, you can get condoms, you can get, different things.
Hmm.
Um, but they don't actually give out methadone.
Okay.
So anyway, so we have about 500, give or take, unhoused people in Cambridge every we do a census count every year,
Yeah.
and the number's always around. Sometimes it's 540, sometimes it's 480, but you're talking about 500 in that ballpark. And not all of those people are struggling with substance use disorder, right? Not everyone who struggles with substance use disorder um, is homeless.
Right.
It's an issue. I just held a human services meeting on this. I'm the co-chair, and I said that in just this past few months, um, I had a friend of mine, 50, I think he was 57, Gary, who was an unhoused gentleman who grew up in Cambridge. We went to high school together,
Hmm.
struggled with addiction, for decades and decades. And he overdosed and died.
Sorry.
Um, and then a month later, um, uh, a 20-year-old young man who was sort of he had been working on my campaign since the time he was 15 and became sort of like a part of our family. He had, his own family, but we became very, very close. Um, he died of an overdose in New York from taking a party drug that was laced.
Yeah.
So you've got two people who could not have been worlds apart, right?
Right.
A 20-year-old kid who was in college, who was
Mhm.
just kind of messing around like we all did,
Right.
you
Sure.
know, and then you've got a chronic, you know, unhoused, person who's struggling with substance use disorder, right?
Mhm.
And so this is an issue that just crosses, every demographic.
Mhm.
So um, we do a lot in the city. We do have a number of shelters. We have one of the only wet shelters on Albany Street, which is obviously a very low threshold. You can be intoxicated either on drugs or alcohol and still have a place to sleep. Most shelters have certain rules around that, and so
Right.
um, so we have that. We have shelters for people escaping domestic violence. We have shelters for, uh, um, uh, Salvation Army has a shelter where you sort of have to buy into their program in order to be there. So there's lots of different shelters in the city. Um, I'm a big proponent of overdose prevention centers.
Mhm.
And when I was mayor, I served on the state's harm reduction commission. I was one of two mayors in the state to be appointed to this commission. And I went to Montreal and I looked at their safe injection sites, what they were called at the time, now overdose prevention centers. And
Okay.
in the close to 40 years that these centers have been in existence, no one has died from an overdose in one of these centers. And basically, it's a place where someone can use drugs under the supervision of a professional, either a nurse or someone who's trained in a certain way. And if that person does suffer an overdose, then someone is there to give them Narcan, give them oxygen, call 911.
Mhm.
No one has died, and ever in any of these around the world. And um, it also shows that people are, I think the percentage was somewhere around 25% more likely to enter a treatment program through one of these centers, because as they go, they establish relationships with people. They start, you start conversations, and then when they're ready to enter a treatment center, they kind of know who to go to, right? So people are more likely to get into treatment and they don't die. Those centers are currently illegal in the
Yeah.
United States and in Massachusetts. There are a couple that have opened in New York. Um, Philly had opened one. It's sort of like the marijuana issue. The federal government isn't really going after them. They're kind
Right.
of don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. Um, but they are technically illegal. So there's been a lot of sort of resistance and concern on the state level about allowing those types of sites to open in Massachusetts. Um, we've made a lot of progress on that, where we were 4 years ago when I was on that commission to where we are now. There are actually bills at the State House that um, to allow those sites to open.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think we'll get there eventually. And I am doing a lot of work to make sure that Cambridge is ready, so that we can open one here when that happens. So there is a lot more we can do. We also have an interesting, and this isn't just around homelessness, but whether it's transportation, the environment, housing. If you picked up Cambridge, Boston, Somerville, and Everett, right? Pick a
Mhm.
town. We would all fit inside Los Angeles,
Right.
right? Or Chicago.
Hmm.
Geographically, we'd be one city. Here were
Hmm.
these little fiefdoms that
Right.
don't talk to each other. I mean, you have bike lanes in Cambridge that they get to the Somerville line and then they just stop,
Yep.
right?
Sure.
Like, why aren't we working with Somerville to continue that bike lane through Somerville?
Hmm.
When Mayor Wu does a sweep of Mass and Cass in Boston, she doesn't call Cambridge and say, hey, by the way, 25 of those people are probably going to end up in Central Square because we're kicking them out of
Right.
Mass and Cass. There's no coordination that happens, but
Yeah.
yet we're all on top of each other and we're all dealing with the same stuff. So we need a more regional view of things here,
Hmm.
on a whole lot of issues. I mean, if I said to you right now, Peter, there's a great restaurant in Framingham, let's go for dinner. You
Hmm.
would be like, Framingham? I'm not going to friggin' Framingham. Framingham is 25 minutes away. In any other
Right.
part of the country, there are people that do that to go to the supermarket,
Hmm.
right?
Sure.
Not how we think here, and we need to be thinking more regionally than we are.
Yeah. That kind of brings up something that we've covered on our show in the past. The obviously Boston kind of allowed the Long Island Bridge to collapse, to a residential treatment center there, and ever since then they've been trying to rebuild it, and Quincy has been fighting it tooth and nail and lawsuits in the state house to prevent that bridge from getting rebuilt. Um, how much of an impact did closing, that was like 2015, I think. How much of an impact did closing that facility have on the population here in Cambridge? And do you think it would help if Boston was able to reopen that facility, whatever, with a bridge, with a ferry, would that ripple here to Cambridge?
Yes. Um, I think it would. And actually, when they closed Long Island, I had filed a policy order asking the city to increase our number of shelter beds, because we knew that there
Hmm.
was going to be, a little bit of an overflow and that we would be seeing, some of those folks. Um, and so, I think it really would help. I mean, the other part about homelessness is that people are unhoused for lots of different reasons, right? I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of the people who are unhoused are people who have jobs, right? They're living in their cars. They can't afford to live here. That's not someone who's going to go to Long Island, right?
Sure.
Um, talking about sort of, my two friends who passed away in overdose prevention centers. My sort of adopted nephew, he would never go to an overdose prevention. He wasn't a drug addict. He was experimenting. He was fooling around, right?
Right.
So he needs a different type of education, a different type of intervention than my friend Gary, who might have used an overdose prevention center, right?
Mm.
So, Long Island would certainly help for a certain population of people, right? And that's important, and that's why it needs to reopen. Um, but there's also some people that if we had a program that said, look, we're looking at increasing starting municipal vouchers in Cambridge, right? there are some people who are unhoused right now that we could say, we're going to pay your first year of rent. And with just that little bit of runway, they may never be unhoused again, right? Because they have a job and they just can't get out from under first month's rent and last month's rent and this and that and brokerage fees and all the other kind. But if you can kind of just give them that little bit of runway,
Hmm.
they wouldn't be unhoused, right?
Yeah.
So this is a complex issue that we have to fight on a number of different fronts. Long Island being one of those, because obviously there are some really vulnerable people, probably the most vulnerable people, who would benefit from having a facility like that. And then you want to make sure that it's not just shelter beds, but that you have services there, that you have, that you have opportunities for people to be able to access, what housing services are out there. I want to start a day drop-in center in Cambridge. I have been pushing for this for several years. Right now, there really aren't places, people say, oh, all these unhoused people sitting in parks and, you know, um, I don't like the way it looks and whatever. Well, those folks don't want to be sitting out in a park when it's 100 degrees outside any more than you do,
Hmm.
right? But there's no place for them to go. In DC, they have a day drop-in center they have showers, they have laundry, they have a barber, they have healthcare, they have housing advocates there. They help people with clothing, they feed people. Like we don't have anything like that here,
Hmm.
right? And so if we need something like that, right? We need a one-stop place where people can go, they get their state ID, right? That's a huge obstacle. You can't access services unless you have a state ID. To get
Yeah.
a state ID, you need your birth certificate and other proofs of identity. All of that costs money. All of that costs time, right? How do we help people, get just even the basics that they need to access the limited resources that we have?
Hmm.
It's a bureaucratic mess. So yeah, we do a lot. We need to do more. Long Island is certainly a huge piece of that, and Quincy needs to look at the big picture because again, you know, if you stop and and I did a project called the this neighbors project where we interviewed unhoused folks in Cambridge just about their life. Where'd they grow up? What did they want to be when they were a kid? And I can tell you, whenever I asked someone who was unhoused what they wanted to be when they were a kid, not one of them said unhoused,
Sure.
right? These were all 10-year-old kids once who
Mhm.
wanted to play for the Red Sox or be a doctor or be a teacher or whatever. And and something happened along the way, right? It could be any one of us. And so people need to stop demonizing, criminalizing, folks who have fallen on hard times because it could happen to anybody. And Quincy needs to just, you know, take one for the team here and do what's right because I mean there are people dying every day and we can prevent that.
Sure. And some of them are from Quincy. It's not like Quincy is bulletproof. And I mean, I'm sure
Right.
people,
There are unhoused people in Quincy too, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's everywhere. But it's hard. I mean, the state house is, for a state that's considered, the bluest or one of the bluest, um, not everybody is a Somerville or Cambridge blue,
no,
right? And and so they're really much more purple, but they run as Democrats, right? And so it's hard because people have different agendas and different interests and different constituencies, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, I talked to Evan Mackay about the state house last week, and it's a big issue. But maybe let's not get.
yeah,
We did talk last month about our show talked about Carl Barron Plaza and the redesign that's going on there. Did was there any I mean, it's basically been leveled, and there used to be kind of, I assume, informal, nonprofits delivering services and food and helping people at that plaza. Was there any plan in Cambridge to kind of relocate that area as a or was yeah maybe you can, I don't know how to ask this question exactly.
yeah, yeah.
What happened to the people who were in Carl Barron Plaza? Where are they now when they are, looking to maybe get a
Yeah.
bite to eat or something?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of those people have just kind of spread out in other places around Central
Mhm.
Square. You see more
Sure.
people at the bus stop in front of the Walgreens. You see more people on the bus stop at Green and Magazine. Now, I
Bank
mean,
of
the important
America.
thing to
Yeah.
remember with anytime you do an infrastructure project, it's inconvenient, right?
Sure.
But that's coming back. It's not going to be, seating is coming back. I mean, that will once that's done, and I'm actually it's part of the much larger River Street
Bike
project that's
lane. Yep.
happening. And I'm actually really glad that they're doing the plaza end first because we didn't want it to wait sort of to the end to do. So that's going to come back and people will return to it.
Mhm.
So, it's a temporary, inconvenience.
Right.
There's Food Not Bombs, I think is one of the organizations
Yep.
that used to serve outside of Carbarron Plaza. They now set up every Saturday at the park across the street from my house. So they're there, right? So now they've just kind of relocated a couple blocks away. Um, Liam's Lunches of Love, which it was started by Liam Hannon when he was 10 years old, and they, distribute food around the city. So they're still out there.
Hmm.
They walk around and kind of with their cart and deliver food to people. So the services are still out there. They're just slightly different than having that centralized place. Um, but again, it will come back.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's a place, that people still are going to feel welcome, right? People of all types, right? I mean, I never really hung out in Carl Barron Plaza regardless, not because I had issue. I mean, I knew most of the unhoused people that hung out there. Like it wasn't that, but I didn't really find it an inviting place. The seating was this kind of
Yeah.
cold stone. You're
Mhm.
exposed to the buses and the streets. Like it wasn't, I never just like I would never. There were no tables. Like regardless of who was there, like I don't think I ever would have sat there and had lunch because it just wasn't
Yeah.
welcoming really to me. But now there's going to be tables, there's going to be a stage where they're going to do some programming where you're going
Mm.
to have music.
Yeah.
um they'll be able to rearrange the seating so that you can do concerts there, you can do performances there. There'll be some more art installation, so hopefully it's going to be a place where everybody can it's going to be more insulated by trees and by fencing so you don't feel like you're sitting in the middle of the street.
Hmm.
So hopefully with all that it's going to be a place that is more inviting for all kinds of people. But I'm sure, folks they'll make it what it is, and folks will be back when that's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so when you were mayor in 2018, there was you were at a ceremony for Astral Weeks Day down in Green Street in Hancock,
Mhm.
which is right near where I live. Um, did did you go to a lot of music? Were you into music growing up? Did you go to like the Middle East and TTs? Is there any well, like what were some of your favorite places when you were then and
Yeah,
now?
yeah. So yes, I many an evening at the Middle East,
Mhm.
in my younger days, and I'll leave it at that.
Mhm.
Don't want to tell too many stories. Certainly TT's, few nights back in sort of my late teens and early 20s at the Rat in Kenmore.
Mhm. Did you ever see
I
did
was
you
a, I
ever
was
see
I was I was a
morphine? Sorry,
huh?
did you ever see morphine around there?
I don't know if I ever saw Morphine. But at the channel, again, not in Cambridge, but
Yeah.
dating myself a little bit. I was a pit rat. In high school, I was hanging out in the pit in Harvard Square with my mohawk and my leather jacket, and kind of did all that scene for a while. Um, I don't. Unfortunately, a lot of the bands that I grew up listening to and stuff are all they're all in their 80s now, and they're or 70s, and they're not touring as much anymore. I think my music library goes up to probably the late 90s, and then it falls off a cliff. 70s, 80s, and 90s is sort of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't go out as much as certainly as I used to at 55 years old with, kids at home. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, obviously, and I grew up in Central Square, so I frequented all those places. Probably the place I miss Hi-Fi Pizza. I don't know if you were
Hmm.
around when Hi-Fi
Oh,
was around, but
yeah, definitely.
um, that was the 2:30 in the morning stop when everybody was coming
Hmm.
home for, pretty crappy pizza, but it was a scene, and I miss that. Um, I love that. I love living in Central Square. Like I love living. I I want Cambridge to be this really vibrant, exciting, fun place. Um, I'm not someone who's like, oh, there's too many lights or there's too many. There's like I like gathering. I like community, being able to get together. I mean, I wish that we had, I've been trying to work with the Central Square bid and the city to, I would love us for Saturday and Sunday nights to close down Sydney Street in Central Square and have food trucks and beer gardens and music and like you look at the Riverwalk in San Antonio, you look at
Yeah.
San Diego, San Francisco, you look at all these places that they close down blocks and blocks of their streets on Friday and Saturday nights, and you got people out there, performers and families and people having a
Hmm.
few drinks and visiting restaurants. Like that's cool. Like that's fun. Like I want that for us here. I think
Yeah.
that would be great, but we're a little too parochial still.
Yeah. Now you're talking my language. Yes, closing down Sydney Street would be great. I think
Yeah.
one thing the pandemic did that they came out of it was the outdoor seating in Central Square, even though it's an improvement on what was there before, I think. Um, and we talked about I feel like Starlight was an attempt to go down that road,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it seems to have. I'm still
Well,
not
it's coming
exactly
back. There,
clear.
there'll be some news soon. I
Okay.
mean, Starlight was an interesting. So there's a lot of gray area here with what
Mm-hmm.
happened with Starlight. So Starlight, the bid had put in a proposal for ARPA money to do a study on keeping Starlight on Lot 5, like where it was,
Right.
right?
And
And
that's the
what
Central
what
Square Business Improvement District.
business
That's
improvement,
what
right?
bid is, yeah.
And that's the bid, and they're
Mhm.
fantastic. And so the study was to look at sort of keeping it there, making it permanent. What would that be like? During the course of that whole ARPA process, which was really, I mean, because of the federal government and all the hoops that everybody had to jump through, it was really a challenging process, but it took a while. The city started to move into looking at what to do with all the different lots in Central Square,
Mm.
right? And how do we maximize, basically look at sort of the future of those parking lots, right? And those lots that the city owned. And so the um keeping Starlight at Lot 5 now started to become, well, is that really the right place for it? Should it be somewhere else? Whatever. So that study that was specific about keeping it at Lot 5 wasn't really necessary anymore.
Mhm.
And so the city didn't give them the money. That's not really why Starlight closed, right?
Okay.
The city is investing close to $1 million a year in Starlight.
Mm.
So that wasn't why Starlight closed because of the loss of that money.
Okay.
Um, and I actually, one place where I did have a little disagreement with the bid is I said, nothing is going to be built on Lot 5 for several years,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Keep it open. Like, will the city, we'll all advocate, everybody on the council supported Starlight. We can advocate to get you more money to keep operating, right? To help
Mhm.
you operate. No one's talking about taking away your operational money.
Mhm.
Um, and just stay open until we figure something else, right? They, for their own reasons, didn't necessarily want to do that. And um, so they closed it. Now they're looking at reopening in another location,
Mhm.
an indoor location in Central Square. And not all the ink hasn't dried on that yet, so I'm not going to disclose too much about that.
Mhm.
And then the question becomes, as we're planning out the other, what to do with all these lots in Central Square, if Lot 5 isn't the best place for Starlight, because maybe we want to build a 15-story affordable housing building there, right? And maybe you don't want to have a music venue right underneath where people are living, whatever, right? For whatever reason, maybe Lot 5 isn't the right place. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that there's not another lot in Central Square that is the right place, right?
Right. Right.
So something's coming back. I mean, I am sure that a cultural center, performance center type venue is going to be in Central Square on a permanent basis somewhere. I can't tell you exactly where at this point, but, um, and again, it's going to be, it might be displaced for a couple of years while some of that stuff is getting figured out,
Mhm.
but there is a commitment by everybody to bring something back. And that's good. And so
Yeah.
it'll work out.
And that you think the manager is behind that as well. You, the way I had understood it at the time was, so the money was just to fund a study. He wasn't pulling funding um, for Starlight.
Right.
Okay.
And I
Did
think,
that.
I think the manager is supportive, but this manager is really interesting because um, he is definitely very sort of, he comes from, the hospital world,
Mm-hmm.
very sort of data driven, wants evidence of things, very, doesn't really shoot from the hip as much as some of our past city managers maybe have done, for good or bad, right? Um,
Yeah.
and some of it's been good and some of it's been not so good, right? Um, and so, he's very much wants to kind of see, what's the business plan? How do we make this sustainable? How do we, so, but he gets there, right, in
Mm-hmm.
most cases. And so, and he does take more guidance from the council than maybe some managers have done in the past. And so when you have 9 city councilors saying, we want this to happen, he tends to be more inclined to do it.
Yeah.
Where sometimes in the past managers have said, "Well, I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to do it anyway," and that's part of the system. It's part of our checks and balance system, and I appreciate it in some ways, and in some ways it frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll get there.
Okay. Well, why don't we leave it there? I appreciate. I mean, there's actually way more I could ask you,
Yeah.
but why don't we leave
Well,
it there?
I'm happy to come on anytime. I believe in being out there. I mean, if you notice, like I'm on Reddit, I'm on Twitter,
Sure.
like I'm out there. I post things, I comment on Cambridge Day. I do, I think it's really important that we try to explain our positions to people and I'm looking at actually I should ask you about this because I want to start a CCTV show
Mm-hmm.
and I want it to be I want to highlight different nonprofits in the city every week or maybe twice a month, however, whatever the timing is, and like do like an interview where I bring somebody on from CEOC or the YWCA or whatever to talk about sort of their work and because I just think there's so much that's going on in the city and we don't always communicate it well and we don't really have a local newspaper now. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Cambridge Day, but there's still a lot of people. My grandmother's not going to go on Cambridge Day. There's still
Right.
a lot of people that like that newspaper. Um, and so it's just it's in some ways it's easier to get information out there, but yet we're not really doing a great job of it. So trying to think about how to do a better job of that, I think is really important. So
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, that's kind of what I've been trying to do, the past year or so. Is we're kind of in a new news desert, and we people should have more information out there. Um, the Crimson called me the other day for quotes. I
mm,
mean, like it's. I mean, they're a great paper, but I don't think we should be relying on the Harvard Crimson to be our newspaper, and the Cambridge Day, of course.
right, right, yeah. I mean, they really, I mean, when they got rid of the staff, and the staff at the Chronicle was essentially
Yeah.
Amy Saltzman. It was one
Mm-hmm.
person, towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
They really did it. And the Chronicle was the oldest, wasn't it the
Yeah.
oldest local newspaper in the country, right? And, to kind of, for a company to turn their back on that is really shameful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's agreed. Is there anything you wish I'd asked you? Anything you got burning right now you want to talk about? Pilot payments,
Um,
anything like that, or just
yeah, I
whatever?
mean, the pilot payments are coming up. I mean, there's a lot going on. I would say, sort of to your community question or, what sort of makes Cambridge special. I mean, I think one of the things that's sort of been hard was kind of hard for me. Growing up here, you grow up, I grew up thinking, Cambridge is this incredibly progressive place and we're this tight community and we all care about each other and we care about people who have less than us. You know, and I think that that's true to a large extent, but it's not as true as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And when I think of community, I think part of community is the people who have more should be willing to sacrifice for the people who have less,
Hmm.
right? And so when you talk about housing, right, I don't want to hear any more about, I don't want to build that housing because there'll be shadows on my tomato plants. Or I
Right.
don't want to build that housing because it's going to take me 10 extra minutes to get home because of traffic. I
Yeah.
don't want to build that housing because it doesn't look like the housing that's already here. Triple deckers were illegal once, right?
Right.
And people fought triple deckers. Um, and now they're the housing that everybody wants to preserve.
Right.
Um, we need to do a little gut check on a lot of these issues, right? And that um, if we really want to be this caring community that we say that we are, then that's going to mean that some folks are going to have to accept some change that they may not love on a personal level, but it's for
Mhm.
the greater good.
Yeah.
And that's a message I really hope gets out there, and because our responsibility isn't just to ourselves, right? It's to the community, and it's even more so to the people who don't have as much as we have. I'm so privileged and lucky. I'm living in a house, that my great grandfather bought for probably $250. I mean, I don't know what the hell he paid for it in 1918.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and instead of being like, oh, I've got mine and roll up the welcome mat, I want other people who don't have that, didn't wasn't born into that privilege to be able to access this city and all the great things that this city has to offer the way I can. And I just, I hope people just really start to say, yeah, maybe, I mean, they're building a 4-story house across the street from me,
Hmm.
right? It was a 2-story house before. Are there going to be shadows on my house a couple hours a day? Yes. Do I care? No. Not going to dramatically change my life, but those are 2 more units that people are going to get to live in, right?
Yeah.
So, I just really hope as we talk about changes that are coming to Central Square and to the city as a whole, that people really start to think about, what do we really believe the progressive rhetoric that we say we believe, right? And if
Hmm.
we do, then you're going to support these things. You're going to support taller buildings. You're going to support more affordable housing. You're going to support more services for the homeless. You're going to support more services for people struggling with drug addiction, because that's what community does.
Right.
So that's kind of my hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well,
So anyway, I've taken up too much of your time.
oh, are you kidding me? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and being our guest. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks for doing this. It's my pleasure. And again, I'm more than happy if there are specific issues that pop up that you want me to comment on. Just let me know. I'm happy anytime.
don't worry, I'll reach out.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Bye.